Okay, you're in. Yep. Okay, everybody's in, should be in. But you don't have your video on, or? Okay. Okay. All right. Got it. Thanks. Okay. Hey.
Hello, Roger.
Okay, can you guys hear us?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so we'll get started. And it's recording, so that's good. All right, so we have Dick Silk here. Dick's from Spokane, got his master's Fuller, right? And works with families, kids, strange people like me. So he's done a lot of conferences and things, and so he's going to talk about working with kids. I'll let him set everything up in terms of what he wants for today. And so with nothing else to do, I'll send you to Dick. You can take your mask off, Dick, if you want to speak.
You all right?
Sure.
Yeah. I really don't mind wearing it, but when I'm
It's
trying
hard.
to enunciate, I gotta be 15 feet.
Yeah.
Like Jim said, my name is Dick Silk. I've been working in the behavioral health counseling field for 55 years. And so I've pretty much seen anything and everything with human interaction with adults to adults, adults to kids, kids to kids. And what I'm hoping is to make this an interactive meeting. I don't want to be the one that just talks the whole time. Feel free at any time to raise your hand and break in. If it's something that I'm going to cover later on, I'll say I'll get to that later on. And the people on Zoom, could you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So same with you. If you feel like you need to break in, please do. One of the things we're going to be primarily talking about is basically the idea, working with kids, of how to be basically a parent. Even though you're an instructor, you're becoming a parent to these kids. And for some of these kids, you may be the most effective parent they've ever had. And I'm not sure people in your position. I do a lot of teacher workshops in Spokane. And one of the things I talk about is you as the teacher are the authority figure for these kids. And maybe the only healthy one they have in their life. And because the statistics show that 50% of all families don't work very well. And that means they end up being labeled dysfunctional family. And that's on a continuum from the 50% up here, maybe 45 to 50 is reasonably healthy. And then we go down to the bottom where we have kids, and you're going to be working with kids like this. They grew up in a family with parents with alcohol or drug problems, family violence, emotional, physical, sexual, verbal abuse. And you're going to be working with some of these kids, and you're going to know who they are because they're the ones that are going to get in trouble. And when I work with teachers, I tell them the same thing, and I'm going to tell it to you. Right from the get-go, from day one, you got to set the boundaries, and you've got to be the authority figure. And if you let one of these kids get away with inappropriate behavior, if you're teaching a group, you're going to lose the whole group. So you got to start right from the start being tough with these kids. Now, part of the problem when I talk about parenting and being an authority figure and being a leader is that some of the people I'm talking to, I see about 6 on Zoom and about 6 here. So that's 12. That means that probably half of you grew up in this family I'm talking about that didn't work very well. Now, the problem with that is when you grow up in a dysfunctional family, as a kid, you don't know it. You think this is normal. And I want to give you an example of a patient I worked with. Jim, can you get me a glass of water somewhere? I want to talk to you about a patient I had that classically illustrates this family she grew up in that was, quote, dysfunctional, and she didn't know it. So I get this woman come into my office. I've been back in Spokane now 35 years. We were talking earlier, grew up in the inner city of Chicago with my new friend over here. We grew up actually part of his time and my time about 3 miles from each other on the south side of Chicago. And came out here to go to college from Chicago. And it was interesting because I'd never been out of the city, basically. So I fly into Spokane. This is back in 1956. I get in this cab to drive me out to Whitworth College. And I say to the cab driver, literally, where are the cowboys and Indians? And I meant it. I mean, and he just started laughing. He said, no, they're around somewhere, a few people, but this isn't the Wild West. And so it went from Whitworth down to Southern California to grad school. And then, thank you. Then I've been working in this field for 55 years. So again, I hope that you will feel free to ask me questions. Now I want to take you back to my patient, mid-30s, very intelligent, attractive woman, master's degree in education. She comes in to see me because she has a problem with alcohol and she has a problem with relationships with men. And so, as I do with everybody I see in my office, I don't care why they're there, I say to her, what was it like for you growing up? And she does what almost everybody does. It says, oh, it was fine. I had a normal family. And so we start to talk and she's smiling. And I ask the basic questions I always do, which are, either your parents have a problem with alcohol? No. Well, did they drink? Yeah. Well, what did they drink? Well, my mom was a nurse in ICU and it was very stressful. And so she'd come home after work every day and have 3 or 4 martinis. Now, if any of you are a home drinker, when you make a martini, it's not the same as when you buy it in the bar. Trust me. I'm a drinker, not very much, but when I drink Crown Royal on the rocks. And in a bar, you get about that much in the glass. When I make it, it's about that much. So this woman says, yeah, my mom makes 3 or 4 martinis every night after work. Hey, how about Dad? Well, yeah, he drank a little. Well, what did he drink? Oh, 6 or 8 beers every night. Now, she started out telling me there's no alcohol problem. Any physical violence in the family? No, not at all. Well, did Mom and Dad discipline you and your brother? Oh, yeah. She's smiling. And I have a couch in the counselor's office that I actually used to take naps on also. But she's sitting on the couch and I say, well, how did they discipline you? Oh, smiling. My dad would bend my brother and I over the end of the couch and beat us with a 2x4. Now, I just told you this and I feel it right here because this is what happened when she said it. And I sat there like this. She said, what's wrong? And I said, that wasn't okay. And all of a sudden, the smile disappeared. And she said, she started to cry. And she said, I remember now, I used to have to go to school and wear long pants because the backs of my legs were full of purple and yellow bruises. Any sexual abuse in your family? No. Anybody ever inappropriate sexually with you as a girl growing up? Oh yeah, my next door neighbor, he was 5 years older than me, and he exposed himself to me many times and had me stroke him. Now remember, 15 minutes before, this woman says, my family was just fine. Now she's sitting on my couch sobbing. And this is what children do when they grow up in families that don't work very well. And the reason I want to make a point of this is that 50% of the people you work with, whether they're kids or adults, grew up in this dysfunctional family, which means they're going to react. They're going to behave in some ways inappropriately, and it's important for you as the instructor, supervisor, authority figure, whatever you want to call yourself, to be aware of this. Now, again, I want you to keep asking me questions. I don't want to have to keep talking the whole time like this. So, how do children that grow up in dysfunctional families survive? First of all, they normalize it. They make it just like this woman. No, I had a normal family. That's the first one. The second one, they disappear it. I'm going to give you another illustration. A man about 40 years old sat in my office years ago, and I said, have you ever talked to your sisters about how you got that big scar across the side of your head? And he said, I'll do it this week. So when he came back to see me, I said, how'd it go with your sisters? And he said, because what happened with the scar, Dad was alcoholic. There was this man and 2 sisters. Mom and Dad at the table. Dad was drunk. This boy knocked over his milk. Dad, with a big ring on his fist, backhanded him and literally split open his whole head. Blood all over the table. Ambulance comes. Paramedics come. Big event. He had about 9 stitches here. So he goes and talks to his sister the next week. He comes back. I said, how'd it go with your sister? He said, I talked to both of them and they said it never happened. He said, but we were all sitting there at the table and there was blood on the table and the ambulance came. They looked at him and said, no, it didn't happen. So first of all, you normalize it, then you disappear it. You minimize it. It wasn't so bad. Yeah, my dad drank, but it wasn't so bad. At least he didn't beat my mom up. Numb out. That's another one where people just, they don't feel anything. In order to survive, they shut off their feelings. And then the last one is kids blame themselves. Now, the reason, again, I'm talking about this, you're going to get these people on the ski slopes. I get kids in my office that tell me this, Dick, I've always been a bad kid. I grew up being a bad kid. I still feel like I'm a bad kid. We're talking somebody 40 years old at this time. So what I do, I've got a little trick I use. My office is about a mile from Sacred Heart Hospital in Spokane. I send them up to the new nursery in Sacred Heart where you can stand in the hall and look at all these babies in the nursery. And I tell them to pick out all the bad kids. And they come back the next week without fail, with tears in their eyes when I ask if they did it, and say, there are no bad kids. But that's how these kids survive. So kids that grow up like that, you're going to be dealing with. And they're going to be the ones that give you trouble. So right from the start, realize that and take charge. Any questions so far from any of my Zoom people or anybody here? No. Okay. Jim asked me to talk about child development stages. So there are about 6 of them. And a couple of them you won't be dealing with because they're real little. This is how they work. If you take a child development course, they talk primarily about 0 to 6 months. The name for that is I'm glad you're alive. I got this little one like this. How many have I got? Talking about great grandkids. I think I've got 10. And I've got one in Portland that's the youngest now. She just turned a year old, and her name is Scarlett. And she's one of those, every once in a while you get a little kid that's different, just always gives you the look, is always connected with you. My wife calls her Miss Scarlett. And one of those kids you just fall in love with. So I'm glad you're alive. 6 to 18 months. Explore and experiment. This is when kids are sort of trying to figure out how to get around. And I've got one great grandkid that doesn't crawl, he rolls. They've tried, were you?
Yeah, I was a roller.
Yeah. Yeah. We tried to teach him to crawl. We get him up and he
Skipped, crawling, and went to walking after rolling.
You did? Well, that's probably
I was walking at 9 months.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got a son, my son, who's now 55, didn't walk till 2. We worried he was impaired. He's now a multi-millionaire. So it really doesn't. Yeah, the rolling. It's the first time I've ever seen it. But I mean, we'll put him up, on his hands and knees, and then say, "Come on over here." He'll flop over and roll. It's just wonderful. We laugh, And so he is 6 to 18 months. They're exploring and experimenting. Now, how young do some of you get kids? 3?
Yeah.
3?
Sometimes a 2-year-old.
Yeah, rare too.
Well, this is where it starts to get interesting. This is explore, realize who you are, and do new behaviors. This is also in child development courses where they talk about the terrible 2s. Because up until 2, this little baby is the center of the universe. And about from 2 to 3 to 4, they're realizing, wait a minute, I'm not as important as I was before. Especially like me, I grew up in a family with 5 kids. I was the oldest of the 5. And I know I got way more attention. In fact, my sister, who's next youngest, has pointed that out to me as an adult. And she's right. I got more attention. I was the first child in my family. I was the first grandchild. And so ages 18 months to 3 years, kids are figuring out who they are. And if they're not as important as they were, they're going to let you know it. So we call that the terrible twos. Now, 6 to 12, and I'm assuming you get quite a few kids in that age, feeling successful, learning the rules of life, and learning from mistakes. And this is a critical age where some parents fail tremendously on this. It's important to let these kids at that age have the freedom to fail. If you do not allow children the freedom to fail, they never learn how to fail. And then they get to be 25 years old. I've got a couple families like this, 25-year-old still living at home in the basement of the family house.
Can you give a quick example of that?
The freedom to fail? Yeah. This is where, like, riding a bike. I remember when I learned how to ride a bike, I was probably 8 years old. And I remember my dad holding the bike, and this is in the city of Chicago, and I'm riding on the sidewalk, and he lets go of me. And I'm coming to the cross street. And I can still remember that day. I mean, we're talking.
Well, that wasn't traumatic.
74 years ago. And my dad, I notice he's not there. I'm hanging onto the handlebars and I'm coming to the cross street. I don't know how to brake. I've never done back pedal and the brakes will go on. So I hit the corner and I tip over because I didn't want to go into this. It wasn't a real busy street, but it was a street with cars on it. So I fall over and I'm crying, and my dad comes and picks me up and he says, "Good job." He let me have the freedom to fail. And where
They didn't berate you.
pardon?
He didn't berate you.
No, didn't get angry. Just let me do that. And I'm sure all of you, if you think about it as a kid, had instances where parents, and it's hard as a parent to watch your kid fail. You know, it's like sometimes watching a train wreck. And but if you don't let them do it, they never learn. They really don't.
So it's kind of two-part. You don't berate them, but you also let them go ahead.
Yeah, it'd be like on the ski slopes with letting the kid learn. I learned how to ski in my 40s. And a friend of mine had a condo in Breckenridge, Colorado. And I've never been on skis. And I'm a pretty good athlete, but I don't have real good balance. So if you saw me going, I'm still skiing at 82. But I don't ski with like a lot. I'll probably all of you do skis right together. I'm about this far apart. But I get down the hill. But I'm with my friend Lou Myler in Breckenridge, Colorado. I take a lesson, and he says, "Okay, you're ready to go." And I said, "Go where?" He said, "Up to the top." I have no idea what I'm in for. None. I don't even know how to get off the lift, hardly. I've been on it twice, I think. So we get off the lift, it's 0 on top of the hill, which really helped a lot for me. So he says, "Just follow me." Well, this guy's been skiing for decades. So, you know, this is another freedom to fail thing. But he took me down the hill, and I think I fell a couple times. And didn't shame me, supported me. This is where it's hard for some parents to do this, to let their kid fail. Because what parents do is they'll take it on as their own failure. If my kid can't do this, that says something about me. And that's why if you watch parents at kids' games, and I'll bet some of you have parents here on the hill the same way.
Oh, yeah.
These parents are the ones that drive coaches, friends of mine that have coached kids, the parents drive the coaches out of the business because they want their kid to look good. I've got a 7-year-old kid who's a soccer player, and he's going to be a pro soccer player. That's what I hear. And you probably get these parents that think their kids are going to make the Olympics, and they aren't. And we'll get into that later on. Dealing with kids' fears. This is an important one because some of their fears will be legit and some of them won't. Some of their fears you'll understand, and some of them, if you're especially in a group lesson, if you get a kid that says, I'm too scared to go down this hill, the last thing you want to do is push them too hard. You've got to be very careful about the judgment you use on that because their fears, whether they're realistic or not, they are to the kid. And it'd be like me. I remember one time skiing up here about 20 years ago. I am and always have been a pretty good upper intermediate skier. I can get down anything. I can go down black diamonds. I don't like to make a steady diet of them. But I had a couple of friends bring me up one time, and I can't remember what run it was, but they took me down through some trees. I said, before we go off the hill, I said, whatever you do, don't take me through trees. I probably could ski through, but I get frightened. And whether they can see it or not, I don't like doing that. And I was so angry at them. I mean, I yelled at them afterwards. I was sweating. I got down through the trees, but my fear was real. And you're going to have kids and adults with fears. And what you do, the first thing you do is you don't shame them. We're going to talk more about that later on. But you get right down, if it's a kid, get down at their level and look them right in the eye and say, what are you so scared of? What about this or this scares you? And they'll talk about it. If you don't, what you don't want to do is, don't be a baby. Come on, you can do this. That's the worst thing you can do because you're shaming them. So if kids have fears, talk with them about the fear, and you may not be able to talk them out of it. They may have to go down a different run or do a different lesson or whatever. But their fears are going to be real. Now, when you're working with kids that are problem kids, you're going to have kids that don't take no for an answer. And you know why? They grew up in a family where no never meant no. And
that's what we get.
yeah,
Whatever.
yeah.
It's gorgeous creatures of God.
Oh, yeah. And I'm guarantee it, if you knew the parents, yeah, lots of times, wealthy kids with parents who have nannies. Yep. And sometimes if you met the parents, they'd be charming. And you'd think, this is what Dick Silk was talking about. The parents are terrific. Not at home they aren't, folks, or you wouldn't have these kids. Kids that are problems grow up and are growing up in problem families, even though they may not look like it. So just know you're the one that's going to have to deal with the no. And again, be firm with it. Don't let them get away with, talking you out of things. You say no. Now, when you have a class, typically how many are in a class? 6, 7, somewhere in there.
The program.
Yeah,
Sometimes it's just a couple, sometimes it's up to 10.
Okay, now if you've got a class with 7 or 8 in it, you're going to have at least 1, if not 2, kids that are going to give you trouble. That's what the percentages show. And always, we do all this research my business. If you got a group of 8, you're gonna have 2 kids that are terrific. You're gonna have 2 kids down here that are pain in the butt, and you're gonna have 4 kids in the middle. Yeah. The 2 kids that are terrific, don't worry about them. The 4 in the middle, worry a little. These 2 can ruin the whole lesson. So you gotta get on it right away with the 2 kids. And I do a lot of business consulting. The exact same thing happens in business. If you've got 10 employees, you've got 2 or 3 that are terrific, 4 or 5 in the middle, and 2 at the bottom that are constant pain in the butt. My son, who's
We got 7 here.
Don't exclude.
I'm one of the bottom. I know, I'm in the bottom.
I was one of the, my wife always says, I don't know how your mother ever put up. Huh?
I got some.
Did you?
Yeah, wouldn't spoon.
Well,
It would break.
yeah.
Oh. No, I did.
Remember that these kids that won't take no for an answer lots of times end up being bullies. And you don't want to let that happen on anywhere, but especially in the ski group. And you have to nip it in the bud because they're not being held accountable at home. And if you hold them accountable on the ski slope, you may hear from the parents. How come you were so tough with my kid? Or how come you kicked him out of class? Tell the parents, well, I don't know. What I would do, I'd tell the parents the truth. I don't know if you all can, if your bosses wouldn't get mad at you for making parents mad, but I'm always honest with people about that and try and tell them that this is the truth. You know, your kid is not going to be a black diamond skier the second day they take lessons. But you get parents that will think that. Now, most of the kids you get in class have parents who also ski.
Yeah.
Most
Yes and no.
Yeah,
70%.
yeah, probably, yeah, probably.
I would guess that if you have kids in class, parents who also ski, that even makes it worse because they're going to think they know as much as you do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially if they ski and their kids snowboard, they usually want to go ski with them.
Is that right?
They want a babysitter who's going to teach them. They want a babysitter who's going to teach them how to get better so that they can go ride at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, again, if you're going to be a good authority figure to these kids, you're going to have to set some boundaries. And if you set boundaries, you're not always going to be right. I can't tell you how many people I have sit in my office that told me when they were growing up, their parents wanted to be their best friend. Well, I'm here to tell you as a parent, and I imagine most of you are parents, and as an instructor, if you're trying to be the instructee's best friend all the time, it's not going to work. You're going to have to be tough with them. Some of you, that may be hard. You know, it may be hard to just set a boundary. Good, I see you shaking.
I have a 9, 11-year-old boy. I was a little worried about letting him fail.
Yeah.
Sometimes, well, my wife is it's good. We should have a balance in this movie. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. When I do parenting workshops, I've probably done 100 of them. And when I do parenting workshops, I always say the same thing. If you have to lean one way or the other, always lean too tough. Because if you go to too easy, they're going to take advantage of it.
So we can watch this on Zoom later, right?
Yeah.
My wife will be watching this. I'm not even kidding.
Okay, here's how to be an effective leader, effective instructor. One, be consistent. Be consistent. Don't change the rules. If you start out a class saying, here's what we're going to do, keep consistent with the rules. Number two, be clear. Be consistent and be clear about it. Number three, be reasonable. You don't have to be a tyrant. Be reasonable. Like explaining a rule. A kid may say, well, why do I have to wear a mask? Tell them why. Be authoritarian when you need to be. In other words, I'm in charge. And encourage independence. Again, the freedom to fail issue. Any other questions about that so far? Any from my Zoom people up there? No? Okay. When parents give kids too much, the kids become entitled. They don't know how to self-soothe, and so that's why they act out at times. And again, you're going to have kids in class. If you've got a class of 6, there are going to be times you're going to have someone you're going to have to kick out of class. There'll be so much of a problem that it'll ruin the experience for the other kids. What we talked about before, parents' view of their kids may not be realistic. Yeah. I have a friend of mine, actually a good friend, who I've skied up here with a couple times. When his kid was in high school at Gonzaga Prep, he was all city in 3 different sports, and I got to know the kid pretty well. So I said to him his senior year in high school, where are you going to college and what sport are you going to do in college? And he said, I'm not going because my dad expects me to be a star and I'm tired of it. Father, every event in this kid, all city in wrestling, all city in football, all city in baseball in Spokane. Dad was at every event from his freshman to senior year, videotaping his performance. And so when this kid would come home from the event, Dad would sit down with him and critique his performance. And the kid, I really liked him. He's very successful now, he lives in Montana. But this is what you have with some parents. They can't accept the fact. This kid could have probably been a good D2 athlete, maybe someplace like Carroll College in Montana, of Whitworth, something like that. But he was never going to play Division I sports. He knew it, but Dad didn't know it. So parents sometimes get into too much expectation. One of the other things they do is some parents, and we use a term in my business, we call it emotional incest. And that's a icky word, sort of, but what parents do is they become too involved with their kids. The kids become too important to them. And there's actually a book written on that called Emotional Incest, a really good book on how parents do that. I worked with a man one time, still see him occasionally, grew up with a family that the parents, the dad owned one of the larger businesses in Spokane, very successful. If I named it and you know Spokane, you know what it was. But the problem was at home, there were 4 kids. My patient was the oldest of 4. And father was alcoholic and consumed every day a case of beer after work. A case, 24 bottles of beer. And you can imagine that didn't work very well in the family. He would berate the wife, and the oldest son, who I've been working with, would stand up to the dad once in a while, and the dad literally a couple times, knocked him out, punched him so hard he knocked him out. And what happened in this family, and this is where emotional incest came in, the wife had no relationship with the husband because of the alcohol. So she became overinvested in the oldest son, and he became sort of the man of the house for her. There was no sexual incest, but there was this emotional incest. And along with the dad beating the oldest son up, then there's this inappropriate relationship with the mom. And you can imagine this kid today at 50 years old is still pretty screwed up. So this is what happens in families where things don't work very well. Now I want to talk about shaming. I don't think any of you will do this, but this is what some of these kids have gone through at home. Here are some shaming statements. How many times do I have to tell you? Shaming statement. What's wrong with you?
I say that all
One following the other. You're stupid. Can't you understand anything? Now, those are shaming statements. They're ones you absolutely don't want to make, and they're ones that some of the kids you work with hear every day. And so they come out there on the ski slopes, and they're going to be a problem because they believe this. If you hear this enough times as a kid, you believe I'm stupid. Something's wrong with me. That's where I get into my bad kids thing. Send them up to the hospital and look at the bad babies. One of the other things you definitely don't want to do with kids or adults, do not get into an emotional, verbal battle with kids. If you get in as a parent or an instructor or a teacher or anything into a verbal battle with a kid, they win. You lose. So whatever you do, you can call it I call it don't get hooked, don't lose your cool. Whatever you do, don't let them punch your buttons enough to where you get engaged in this verbal battle with a kid. Rules and consequences. That's the love and logic. Who you had that guy here a couple of years ago? Foster Clank, yeah. The same with these kids. If they're not following the rules, give them a consequence. Don't get into a verbal battle with them. Yeah, because it never works. And I'm talking about as a parent too, because I remember growing up at times getting into verbal battles with my oldest daughter. I lost and she won every time. I'm sure when I walked away, she was smiling. So the same on the ski slopes. Learn the walk away, which means you state your point, you state what you're going to do if they keep doing it, and you learn how to walk away. Question?
Well, you gotta be,
Yeah.
in other words, even though you walk away, the rules still apply.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Even though you walk away, the rules still apply. If the way rules and consequences work, basically the beauty of that concept is the kid or the adult gets to make a choice. Here's the rule, and you get to choose either to keep it, or if you don't, here's the consequence. So your choice. Natalie has a question? No? No. Okay.
I think the more you talk about it and debate with them about it, the more they subconsciously feel like it's up for debate. There's options here. And and the more you talk about it, drag out, the more like, okay, this is budget.
Yeah.
Whereas you want it to be not budget.
That's exactly what happens. The more you engage with them, the more you give your power away, the more they take your power. And pretty soon, the 8-year-old are just sitting there going, what just happened?
Yeah, but an example, I mean, a lot of times we'll have a kid crying out on the carpet, and, you know, then it's, okay, it's kinder camp kid. Okay, you have a choice, join the group. Or not.
Yeah,
That's it, that's it.
that's it.
There are no other choices. But I want cocoa. No, here's your choice.
That's not an option.
That's not an
Right.
option. Here's your
Right.
choices. You go back to kinder camp or you join your class. So what do you want to do? I know your mom wants you to ski. Ski. So she'd really love to have you do that. But if you don't want to, here's your other option.
Yeah.
That's it. And if you start adding more options, they know, oh, okay.
Eating it.
Yeah.
Back and you walk away.
That's it.
Call Jim.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Again, when you do the walk away, they're not gonna like you. You're not fair.
you're right.
With kids,
But they'll respect you. Whether they know it or not, they'll respect you.
they will.
Yeah.
Consciously.
Because what happens with parents, I had one woman once, she had an 8-year-old son, and he would get mad at her, and he would say, I hate you. And she literally would fall on the floor and sob. What do you think that the message was to the kid? You're 8 years old and you have all the power. Yeah, because when you won't see the hate you probably on the ski slope, but if a kid says I hate you, they don't hate you. And what I tell parents when they always ask me at parenting workshop, what do I do when my kid says he hates me? You say, sounds like you're angry. Because that's really the truth. They don't. And if a kid gets angry at you, you're not fair, you're mean. You just say, sounds like you're angry. Because that's the bottom line, and it's okay if they're angry. Now, it isn't okay if they're abusive. I don't know if you get teenagers that call you names, but that's something you can't let happen.
Well, the ironic thing is they're what is love. Because you love them, you don't let them do something.
Got it.
Or they hate you.
Yes,
And that's how I respond. I mean, if your kid never says I hate you, you probably weren't firm enough because they're gonna say it at some point.
yeah,
Yeah, I respond because I love you.
that's it. That's the truth. And that's really what works. Now, Jim asked me to talk a little bit about kids with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. This is a tough one. A lot of these kids, I've got some real weird beliefs about this. A lot of these kids are medicated and they are seen as problem kids. They're in special ed classes at school. And my different belief is I don't think a lot of these kids are special ed. I think I believe that ADHD kids are, not all of them, but a lot of them are growing up in families where there's trauma of some kind. And what it does, trauma in a family stimulates cortisol in the brain. Cortisol is what acts like speed for us. It revs us up. And I'm not a big fan of putting kids on medication, but there are going to be some kids you're going to have that are on meds like Ritalin and Xylert, which, in case you aren't aware of it, those are exact same drugs as speed, illicit speed, meth. They are the same. They work the same way. So you're going to have these kids, and my belief, I don't know how you do it on a ski slope, but when I work with teachers and they have ADHD kids, if the teacher gets the kid active and moving and involved in something, usually it will take care of the problem. Not always, but these kids are usually bright. They're usually smart kids. Okay. They're overstimulated. A lot of these kids are very bright and I think they see more of the world. I have a granddaughter who's now 25 years old. She's the second child of my oldest daughter, Carrie. And when Noelle was little, I never get involved with my kids' parenting, even though once in a while I may see them do something I think too. I never say a word unless they ask. When Noelle was a little tiny baby, I would get a call a week from Southern California from my daughter Carrie about this little girl. Dad, what am I gonna do? One time she called and she said, I was making cookies and I went to answer a phone call and I came back and Noelle had taken a whole stick of butter and ate it. Ooh, but I get another call. Dad, she called me while this was happening. She called me. She said, Dad, I can't find Noelle. And her backyard, my daughter's backyard, is totally fenced. So she couldn't have got out. They have a little pool. She didn't fall in the pool. What had happened at a year and a half, she'd shinnied up the swing set. You know, one of those B swing sets. And the top of the swing set was under an overhang of a tree. And she was up on the bar on the top at 1.5, probably 6 feet up. And Carrie couldn't see her. But that was typical of Noelle's behavior. Carrie's all excited. She says something's wrong with Noelle. She goes to the doctor. The doctor said, let's put her on meds. I said, absolutely not. If you saw this woman today at 25, she got a full ride scholarship to Southern Methodist University. She was summa cum laude in college, got a $75,000 job right out of college, and is just a wonderful adult. But this is what happens with kids that get labeled ADHD. Some of these kids, I think there's some genetic stuff there, but a lot of these kids just need a firm hand. With an ADHD kid, absolutely don't be soft.
It's way overdiagnosed.
Yeah. They're distracted. It's hard for them to concentrate. Most of ADHD you see in kids is with boys. There are a few girls, but the majority of the ADHD work. Yeah.
Conclusion was I don't get to eat my hat. I would literally trick or treat and I would be so hyper. I was shocked.
This is you? Yeah.
They didn't diagnose me. I would have been.
Yeah.
But you bring up a good point to bring us to ski. So I have a ski lesson and I can sense the kids are at the top of the hill. And I know once we start going down, they'll be fine. Or this could be fine. I go, we just gotta start going down the hill. He wants to go down the hill.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what you're saying. But we want to cover certain things before we start going down the hill. So it's always a balancing act that's important to
Yes.
cover.
That's good.
But I know that, and I have this I have this hyper kid, and he's kind of giving me a hard time, and he's disrupting the class. But I have a hunch once I get him going down the hill, it'll be fine. And sure enough, once I get him going down the hill,
Yeah.
it's fine.
Yeah, and I like what you brought up about balancing. You've got to be tough with them, but you got to be reasonable. If you've got a kid that a parent said, this is a problem kid, he's got ADHD, you're going to know he's going to be one of those kids you've got to be tough with, but get them moving, get them doing something. Even give them a task as sort of a leader, maybe, and they'll love it. The other thing you're going to get, and this is an even tougher one, autism spectrum kids. Yeah. Now, if you get a really serious autistic kid, I don't think you'll get them on the ski slope. I think they would be too terrified to ski down a hill. But you're going to get kids with what we term Asperger's, which is on the autism spectrum. And they have fear. I have a great-granddaughter who's now 4 years old, and her parents do not recognize, will not recognize she's on the autism spectrum. And when I was down in Southern California a couple of years ago at a wedding with one of my grandkids, this little granddaughter was 2 at the time, and all the people at the wedding scared her. And here's about 80 people at this wedding at the dinner afterwards, and she's terrified, so she's screaming. 80 people there, and this little tyke is screaming, ah, ah, because she's scared. So you're going to get kids on the autism spectrum, and they're going to act out. They're going to yell, maybe. They're going to say sometimes naughty things. They are tough to deal with. You're shaking your head. Have you had someone like that?
The problem is the child might be mildly autistic and the parent doesn't tell Jim or anybody. They just form in a group and it's not conducive to a group setting. It'd be better off if it's one-on-one. It doesn't take me more than about 6 minutes to be able to tell them something.
Yeah, and that's just like my granddaughter. If they had her skiing, they would not tell you she has problems because they don't want to face it. They don't want to talk about it. Parents sometimes are shamed by having a kid on the autism spectrum.
So I had a borderline test, and the kid's mom said, just ignore what he said. Just don't worry. No one told me. I didn't even realize the talk bus was over. I go, oh, that was stress. Because the mom said, don't worry about what he said. That's a red flag.
Yeah, no. What does that mean?
Oh, yeah. I mean, some Tourette's kids get awful with the language. Awful. Yeah. And with Tourette's, there's nothing they can, once they get into that behavior on a slope, like you can't stop it. You can go to them and say, now don't. They literally are just going. It's like, oh. So I don't know what to tell you with autism. It's just a tough one. And even I work in an office building, and the next door to my office in this building is the Spokane Autism Spectrum Group. And I talk to them a lot about autism. Even they can't deal with some kids. And that's all they deal with. So you're going to get kids that sometimes I don't know what to tell you. It's going to test you. Yeah.
Normally tell the parents, this isn't a problem, but it's just better to have it in a one-on-one setting.
Yes, that would be the best way, do one-on-one. Because
we
again,
can't teach your child.
autism kids get scared of different behaviors or sounds or anything. And like my little granddaughter Ellie, in a normal family setting with 6 or 8 of us, you couldn't tell that she's Asperger's. You get her in that wedding with 80 people and noise and laughing, and she freaks out. So that's a good idea. I think if you get an autistic kid, go individual.
So I have a question from, are there things you can say to calm these individuals down? Calming words, things to diffuse the situation?
Okay, we'll take both of them. With ADHD, yeah, you could probably, if you're working with a kid, the one thing you want to do is you want to get down here and have be right about here with them and look them right in the eye, and sometimes maybe gently grab their shoulders, just touch them, don't grab them, but just touch them, and then just talk to them and say, it sounds like you're upset right now. What can I do to help, etc. Now, the problem with Asperger's is that's probably not going to work. Asperger's kids get into fear, and I don't know if you can do it, Jim, on the slope, but one of the things that works with autistic kids is to touch them if they'll let you. And if you can just hold them, maybe on the sides, and that might work. I don't think verbally trying to calm them down is gonna do much with an autistic kid. So,
Now, Jim, don't we have, with the parents, don't we have special, needs classes for kids with special needs? Not sure.
Specific kid?
Yeah, like if someone is autistic, we get a school group and a teacher say this kid's autistic, and then we kind of do a one-on-one or,
Not really. I mean, we have a lot of kids in fanatics that have autism. And so, it's one of those where, we have one kid he's been in the program for, I think this will be his 5th year. And again, he started working with Susie and she really talked through, he's not just mildly autistic, but this has been the best thing socially for him because he doesn't do well in school, but they do different things and she's just allowed him to know this is okay. This is a safe space.
that's the key. With autistic kids, the key is safety, emotional safety. And he's connected with this woman instructor and feels safe.
And he's connected with the other kids because she's talked to them and said, okay, here's some things, he may say or do some things, it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they're okay with it. And they understand and they give him a little bit more grace than maybe they give another kid and understanding. So some of that is building a group and building a team that, okay, and saying, okay, that wasn't appropriate to say, so.
Yeah.
What else, what could we say that would be different, that would be kinder?
So the good point here is if you have an Asperger's kid, try to develop a sense of safety with them, where they feel like you are a safe person. That will really help in connecting with them and keeping their behavior under control. Because my little granddaughter in that wedding didn't feel safe at all, felt terrified. And that's why she acted out. So if you can develop that sense of connection, but it really help if you knew ahead of time.
Yeah,
that Bobby has got autism spectrum problems. You can make a special effort then to connect with Bobby. Yeah.
And sometimes the parents will tell you, I mean, again, I'm sure we don't know everything, but, within, fanatics, Mount X, some of the things we're trying to find out what those things are. But the key is realizing that and dealing with it. And a lot of times you'll be told, it's like, okay, this kid's, a high functioning autistic kid. And so now, okay, you need to adapt and there may be some behaviors that they display. And, you need to understand that, okay, that's probably coming from this place. And what can we do then?
Yeah.
And a lot of families that have kids on the autism spectrum, this is a place for them to be able to normalize and socialize because they may be very athletic. And we've got some kids that are great skiers that are autistic. The behavior outside of skiing, or they want to go do their own thing, they're wrapped up into their own world a little bit.
Yeah.
And so it's trying to get them out of their world a little bit and move along. So and part of that is to try and get them to engage with the other kids in appropriate ways.
Yeah.
And letting the other kids let them know that they're safe to be with them.
Any other questions? Okay, that's a wrap.
Anything from you guys? What about, I do have a question.
All right, we got one more.
Okay, so we had some issues last year. And I'm gonna kind of wrap that into two questions. We had some behaviors last year, kids hitting other kids on the chair with poles. Just some violent behavior.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, and again.
Bullying type of
Bullying,
stuff.
but yeah.
Yeah.
The other side of that is we're gonna have a lot of kids this year who have not been socialized. They're at home doing school, they're at home doing everything. This may be the first time in 9 months they've had any contact with other kids. Are there things that we should be dealing and looking for this year that are gonna be different? And when we get into some of those things, whether it's violent or whatever kind of outcome that's coming from their frustration of not being with friends, of not being, are there things we can do to manage classes better so that everybody's safe, so that everybody's functioning?
What creates safety for kids is being tough. Keep saying it over and over and again. You would be amazed at how many parents I work with can't be tough. Moms and dads. And so right away, if you get any kind of bullying, nip it in the bud right at the start. That isn't okay here. If you continue to do that, you're gonna have to go down, we're gonna pull your ticket. Right away with the bullying stuff, it's hitting with the poles or whatever it is. And I think you're right about socializing. Again, what makes social situations work okay is a sense of safety. What gives these kids safety is all of you being tough with them and saying, here are the rules, here are the consequences. Yeah.
Clear parameters.
Yeah.
Make kids feel loved and cared. You get these kids that'll say, oh, you know, my kids will say to me, their parents let them get away with anything. They must really love them. And those are the kids who don't feel love because subconsciously they're like, my kids really care about me. It's 12 o'clock and I'm not home. But kids who have really clear and parameters
Absolutely.
subconsciously feel loved and cared.
Yep. Yep. Good point.
And the opposite's true. If it's
Yeah.
a loosey-goosey class, they're not going to feel really, I mean, oh, he's cool, he lets us do this. But deep down, they're going to feel like their speech instructor doesn't really care.
Good point. Okay, that's it. Now it's a wrap. Thank you for your good question and feedback.
Yeah, I already got you. Hey, thank you.
Jim, what was the name of that kid who punched Nick? And I ended up.
Yeah, a lot of people said that's Nick, not the kid, but
Then I ended up having